Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Shawn, and today we are talking about expansions, and we got 4 of them that we're going to talk about, but you know what, it makes a lot more sense just to introduce them one by one, so let's just roll right into that. So the first one we are going to talk about is Ark Nova Marine Worlds, and this adds a whole bunch of new marine animals, as the title suggests, as well as aquariums, as well as it's got these new alternate action cards, 4 of them for each of the 5 actions, and it's got new animal markers, new player markers that are shaped like animals.
And those are purely aesthetic, but I really appreciate that they added them in. They've got primates for yellow, which is my favorite color, and the penguins look really great. And they are just meant to replace the cubes that you put out on the conservation projects. And that's it. It doesn't change functionally at all.
But it's a big change, and it's an awesome change, and I really like those penguins. I also like the blue fish quite a bit.
One of the elements that does change things are the action cards. And how those work is each player gets dealt 3 at the very beginning, and then you draft 1 and you pass it, and you end up with 2 at the end that will replace your basic action cards. And they just change those actions a little bit. It's still the same action you get to do. There'll just be a small add-on, and it might be different from one side to the other side too.
Yeah, that's really interesting, is that the side 1 and side 2 additions can be so different, and that can really make a difference in how you use those as well, like when you level up some of those cards, because all of these action cards, like the difference is small enough that if you're pretty new to Ark Nova, it's not going to make a huge impact on how you play. But if you've played this game like 100 times, I could really see these impacting people.
Yeah, I had an interesting one the other day where when I played an animal, I could ignore one of the restrictions when it was at a higher level. So it's small little change where playing an animal is still what that card does, and it still is stronger higher up, but that it might just affect it a little bit.
And so we've really liked those new action cards, and I think that's the thing that everyone's really going to talk about from this expansion. But I think at least equally important are the marine animals, and there's 54 marine animal cards, if I remember that correctly. And most of those are marine animals. Some of those are also the sponsorship cards and the goal cards and whatnot. Most of those are tied into the marine animals, though. And it's really cool having all of the new animals as well as the aquarium. But it's also impressive that they've done such a good job of adding cards, but at the same time making it easier to actually get through the deck. So actually, it feels like you see more cards, even though there are more cards in the deck now.
Yeah, that was my worry when I heard they were going to add a bunch of cards, is it meant that if you really needed to collect a certain animal icon, it would then be harder to get those icons because more cards are added in. But how it works is when the cards go out into the market row, if it's a marine card, then you actually discard the first card that's out there. And because of that, it cycles through pretty quickly. And a lot of the cards they've added in also give you, I think, a few more options to see more cards just in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of the new powers let you dig through the deck. I think that's one of the new powers, which lets you kind of flip through until you find one that has the icon that you're looking for, or just letting you draw some cards off of the top of the deck as well. I feel like I've never looked at so many cards in a game of Ark Nova as I have here, and I know that was one of the big complaints originally, was that sometimes it can feel a bit random, or it can just feel like you're a bit at like the mercy of the draw. And I definitely feel like they've done a good job to mitigate that a little bit with this expansion.
And the other thing that got added to mitigate that is the universities. There is now a new one that lets you be able to choose a specific animal icon. So if you're feeling really stuck despite all of that, then you can still be able to get that icon that you might really need to be able to give to a conservation project. And just having different conservation projects and different endgame goals is nice as well, because I don't feel like there was like a huge selection in the base game, that it is nice to have just more of them.
Yeah, and it adds a little bit more of all of that stuff, as well as the bonus tokens So it's a whole bunch of stuff in this pretty slim box, and I think this is one we're just going to leave in all the time too.
Yeah, I think so. The only exception might be if we play with brand new players, we probably wouldn't use the action card drafting because they just wouldn't know what to draft and why have the little extra bonus to learn.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing I would take out, though. Like, I think even the marine animals I would leave in there. I think I don't see any reason to take anything else out. But yeah, those ones for the first couple games, that would make sense.
The next expansion is Cascadia Landmarks, which adds 45 habitat tiles, 5 starter tiles, a bunch of wildlife tokens and nature tokens, and a bunch of this is to make it possible to now play with 5 to 6 players. It also adds scoring cards, so there's 3 more scoring cards for each of the different types of animals. And importantly, it adds the landmark scoring cards and the beautiful landmark tokens.
Yes, and the titular landmarks are definitely the star of the show here. And how that works is at the beginning of the game, you take a number of landmark cards equal to the number of players for each of the 5 different kinds of habitats. And so you lay all of those out, and then you also have these really pretty little wooden landmark tokens that go along with those. And as you play, every time you've got 5 of a kind of terrain in a group, you can choose to take one of these landmark cards and landmarks. Then you have to put the landmark on whatever the tile is that you played to make that 5, though you still get to play your animal somewhere else. And importantly, you actually begin the game with 1 more habitat tile as well. So you start with your 3 plus the 1. So you've got 4 starter tiles to start out. And that's important because as you put out those landmarks, you can't put an animal anywhere that you put a landmark. So you're going to end up with fewer habitat tiles that you can choose to put animals on, which as the game goes on, can become a little bit tricky.
Yeah, and it can be a tough decision as to if you take that scorecard and the token or not, because sometimes it will only give you like 1 or 2 points, and having that space available for the animal will make you score more. When we first played this, we went like all in on the landmarks. As soon as we got 5, we're like, yeah, we're going to place it, and we realized that's not necessarily the winning strategy.
Yeah, I actually got really frustrated the first time that we played with this because I really targeted those landmarks, and pretty quickly I only had like 2 habitat tiles I could place animals on, and I was discarding animals, which I never do in Cascadia. And so it is important to kind of pace that a little bit. Like it's this interesting kind of push-pull of, because there's only 2 out, and sometimes one of them is a lot better than the other one, you do kind of want to rush to that, but also you don't really want to be putting those out until kind of the last half of the game. And you don't have to put them out right when you get to 5. You can put it out on your 6th or your 7th or your 8th tile as well.
And that can be quite helpful because there are times when I place a tile and I know that I really won't end up putting an animal there anyway. It's like, oh, I can only have a group of 3 bears and this one is going to be a 4th bear. It's useless. So it is nice to have the option of, I still want to put this tile to expand this territory, and now at least I can get some points out of something else as well. But it certainly does restrict you a lot too.
So usually it's like that sort of situation is where you really want to play this, but you don't notice that. You don't really realize that for your first couple of games. So right at first, I was like, this just makes this game way, way heavier. This, like, the decision space has gotten so much tighter now, and I don't know if I like that. But as we've got to like our 3rd or 4th game of this, I've started to realize, oh, actually, these are sometimes things, not all the times things. And then it feels like, actually, this can increase your space if you use it in the right way.
Yeah, and the other thing that felt like an increased complexity is now some of the new habitat tiles have 3 habitats on them. And so that can be a bonus sometimes, particularly because a lot of the new scoring cards tie into animals being on certain types of habitats. So having 3 increases the chances that they'll be on that. But it cuts it off as well. And so when we're playing with like mainly the new tiles, we were getting really frustrated at cutting off our main territory. But you weren't supposed to do that. You're supposed to mix them in with the regular ones.
Yeah, we played one game with only the new stuff, just like, let's just see the new stuff. Don't do that. It becomes such a tight, difficult game with only the new stuff. It is really meant to be watered down with the stuff from the original and just add little bits here and there. But it is interesting how the three habitat tiles, I thought, oh boy, I'm going to build these huge groups. And I did not think about, those are always end pieces. Those are always closers. They're never connectors.
But like I alluded to before, those can be really great for the new wildlife scoring cards, because some of the ones that got introduced now have to do with the animals being on certain types of tiles, which is interesting because the other ones do feel a bit repetitive pretty quickly. And so I think this does bring some fresh cards to it, to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, the first ones, it felt like for some of them, it was like 4 of the 5 were basically the same thing. And I think in this expansion, basically all 3 of each of them bring something a little bit different. So those are a welcome addition too. But for this one, is this one that you're going to want to play with all the time? Is this one that you would put in game 1 with new players?
No, I don't think I'd play it with new players, and I'm not sure I would include it all the time when I play as well. Like, we love Cascadia. Spoiler alert for our top 100 list, we had it really, really high, and I like the simplicity and the quick decisions, and this increases the complexity a little bit that I don't feel like you need to have it. Mm-hmm. But now that we've played it a few times and we realize you don't have to grab the landmarks and it doesn't have to be as difficult of a decision as we were making it seem, I do like having the option.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing we're, 30 games into playing Cascadia or something. And I feel like that's about the right time to introduce this. But even still, it's probably something we're going to use 50% of the time, I think.
The only exception would be is if you're using the extra tiles to play with 5 or 6 players, in which case you would use this expansion right away.
The next one is the smallest one of the bunch, but it adds quite a bit, and that is sea salt and paper extra salt. And this adds 5 different kinds of cards. There's a lobster that plays with crabs and lets you draw 4 cards and keep 1. There is a card that gives you 1 point for each of the crabs that you have. There's a card that is a starfish, and when you play 2 cards and that card, it gives you 2 extra points, but you don't get to use the power of the other cards. There's also a seahorse that counts as part of any kind of set. And finally, there's a jellyfish, and if you play that with a swimmer, the next player can only draw 1 card from the top of the deck, and they can't do anything else on their next turn. And all of this stuff changes the game in these kind of subtle but interesting ways.
Yeah, because the game already is all about the sets and the mix of cards that you're seeing that all present in differently depending on the game. And so those cards really change it up. And I think the biggest thing is a lot of those cards have to do with the crabs. Mm-hmm. So I think 3 of those have to do with making the crabs a bit stronger. You can now be able to play it with a lobster instead, and on all of those options increase the strength of the crabs, which is great.
Yeah, because the crabs were really the weakest part. The crabs were the throwaway card, and now they're not necessarily. They're still one of kind of the weaker cards, but with the lobster, and especially with the starfish, because the starfish playing with the crabs is excellent, because you can live without that crab power an awful lot of the time. So you regularly see 2 crabs and a starfish, and now that's worth 3 points right out of the gate. But also the seahorse has really helped. It's helped the octopuses, which were already so strong, but it also really helps the sailors, which there are so few of, the penguins, which there are so few of, and the seashells, which I always thought were kind of the weaker cousin of the octopi. And this now gives you obviously 1 more to build that set.
And you can only use it for 1 type of set. So if you do use it with an anchor, I think that's the best bang for your buck. But it is nice to have it as an option to flesh out any set that you're currently working towards. And I like the jellyfish as well, because it is nice that it reduces the attacks a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And so you still get punished if the person plays the jellyfish swimmer combo, because you can only take off the top, but that feels less punishing than them taking one of your random cards.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because we seem to now have like a proliferance of sharks all the time, and we don't necessarily want those sharks all the time. Because before it was like if a shark came out, we were basically taking it. But now there's like a decent chance that we've played our swimmers with the jellyfish, and now these sharks are just kind of like clogging up the deck. So we've had times where there's two sharks in the discard pile, and that would have never happened before.
No, it certainly wouldn't have. We like doing our attacks and taking those cards from each other. And I think one of the things it does dampen is being able to have a mermaid win, because there are more cards, so the likelihood of being able to get 4 mermaids is even less. But it is meant to be like this unicorn moment that rarely happens. We've played tons of games. You've managed it once. So I think decreasing the odds of something that's already very unlikely is all right.
Yeah, and I've had my mermaid win, so I feel like check. I've already done it. I feel great about it, but I'm sure you can tell from us talking about it, we play this an enormous amount. We play this game a lot. We've got, I don't know how, but like 40-ish, 50-ish plays of this game under our belts. So we really notice these new cards. But I think you could put these in right out of the gate too, because I think they do such a good job of kind of balancing what were some slight weaknesses in the original game. Like, I feel like if they were to release this game with these new cards right now, that they wouldn't save this for an expansion. This is kind of like a little bit of almost a patch.
Yeah, I would agree. And now that we have them mixed in, we won't take them out. We'll play with them with new players. We'll play with them when we play with them all of the time. I don't like that I haven't won since we've introduced them.
I really like that about it.
So we'll see if I can finally get a win out. Maybe then I'll take them out to see if that was the issue. But they do a really good job of balancing everything. The last expansion we want to talk about is the newest expansion for the Lost Ruins of Arnak, and that's the Missing Expedition. It has a whole bunch of stuff that you can just mix right in with the base game. So a whole bunch of cards. It also has a double-sided research board. It has 2 new leaders. And importantly, it has a whole campaign that you can introduce to play through cooperatively.
Yeah, and that is definitely the biggest part here. And we love that when there's an expansion that really changes the base game. And you don't see it that often. We saw it with like the Rise of Fenris, with Scythe, with Orleans. But this one I kind of put on that same level where it takes the game and it's just this completely different way to play the game, and the expansion or the campaign works both solo and cooperatively.
Yeah, and because we play at 2, because you can only play 2 when you play the campaign, it works really well, and I really like it. We haven't finished it yet, but the weekend that we got it, we played 3 games, basically back to back going through it. It's really interesting playing it cooperatively, and it gives you specific goals to work towards. So I found that it pushed you to play the game in slightly different ways. So sometimes it'd be really trying to go up the research track but add in extra barriers to make that part even harder. Other times it would be having to defeat a whole bunch of guardians. Other times it might be having to explore a lot of sites and even just like leave guardians. And it got me playing the game in a way that I hadn't before, because I would often just kind of like go up the research track and then make sure I had a few guardians and explored a few sites. This is really pushing me to try to play it differently.
Yeah, because each one of the scenarios has just these totally different setups, and you're right, it's kind of a mix of like hurdles. It's got something that's really working against you and like you have to do, as well as it's got a few goals, and if you complete those goals, you get extra cards. You get to keep cards that you can use in the next game as well. And then after that game, I believe you mix them into the deck too, so then those become available cards for your party moving forward. And all of that stuff I think works really well. So it's like it's not really like a legacy campaign or anything, but it definitely builds a little bit.
Yeah, and it is a challenge. I mean, we've managed to win so far, but it really felt like we were like squeaking those wins by, and you do have to play cooperatively, and I think that's a huge bonus, because Lost Ruins is just such a tight game that to take a really tight game and make it cooperative keeps it super interesting, because you are able to work together in terms of communicating about who will go where and who will you'll try and complete certain things. But also, they have these pigeons. So you can send something to the other player, which can really help get them out of a pinch.
Yeah, and you're not going to alpha game this. Like, I dare you to try and alpha game this because you just have too much to think about already in front of, like, on your own board to even dream of thinking about the other player's board. So you really do have to work together. And I think one of the great things about this, too, is Jess has won this game like 90% of the time over me. She's really good at nailing that research track. So I'm just happy to win now and have her on my team.
Yeah. Would you say that you prefer playing the cooperative version to the competitive version?
Yeah. I definitely, I like winning sometimes. But no, I really like the co-op version. I think it feels like that's almost how the game's built. Like, it doesn't feel like you're playing this in like a weird way that's against the system. It feels like, oh yeah, this is perfect. This is like perfectly comfortable playing it like this.
You are playing with almost a bot player because there is somebody that is introduced that you're competing against. So if you don't like playing with a bot player, this cooperative experience does have that. We haven't found that to be a problem. It's really straightforward in terms of what they do, but it is worth mentioning in case you don't like the little extra upkeep.
Yeah, and it's a pretty minimal upkeep. Like, I would compare it to like Dune Imperium when you play that at 2 players and you've got that really minimal bot. This is pretty much exactly the same thing as that is. But it does fill up the spaces, and it gets in the way a lot, actually. The bot is really a pain in the butt, but it's not a pain in the butt to run. It's just a pain in the butt in like the way that they want it to be. There's also the other stuff to talk about too. So the 2 new expedition leaders, what do you think about those?
I really like the mechanic. So the mechanic is interesting because it has these like gears that you're able to fill to put in stuff to get extra bonuses. And you're able to unlock a 3rd assistant, which is a monkey. So the mechanic has definitely stood out for me more so than the journalist. I think the journalist is interesting. He's all about exploring sites to be able to like collect the journal tokens and be able to use those to get bonuses. And I managed to like, I think, fill like a whole article and get a lot from it. It just felt really difficult because you have to spend a movement to be able to collect it. That in something, again, that's so tight. To spend that to get that later reward felt tough.
Yeah, because we played with these 2 first competitively before we began the campaign. And then when we started the campaign, we were like, maybe let's leave the journalist at home and let's use some of the older ones. Because we wanted to do well on the campaign and work well together. So yeah, I would definitely agree that one feels a little bit weaker. But I like that these ones have just more to them. Like, there's more stuff. First of all, which I don't know, sometimes I like. And there's kind of like a little bit more creative mechanics in there. I think it's just a matter of how do you use them, and we have not figured that out with the journalist. Whereas the mechanic felt just immediately interesting, and that gear turns too all the time. So there's like a lot of planning that goes with that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, so I think they are an interesting addition. So if you're already tired of the older ones, it is nice to have these newer ones that you can definitely mix in. And the other addition too for playing the base game is the research track. And so one of those is a waterfall one. So it adds these waterfall tokens that add a bit more of a barrier to getting up the research track.
Yeah, and I love having another research track because there's only 2 in the base game, so it is really nice having that. But I would say if you are not going to play this cooperatively, I don't know that I would recommend this. Like, I don't know if there's enough stuff that I would add in, and I don't know that the expedition leaders are strong enough that you necessarily need them to replace the first chunk. So if you are only looking to add the stuff for playing normally, I don't know. But I would strongly recommend playing the co-op anyway. The co-op's fantastic. And if you're interested in the co-op and the campaign, go for it.
Yeah, it really blew us away. We were excited about it when we had heard about this campaign. And we, like I said, we played it 3 times back to back. We really love it. Even though it is one that we can definitely easily go back and play through, I've almost like put a pause on it because I don't want to rush through the
Yeah,
story.
get to like...
I'm just liking this cooperative experience and each chapter feeling so different that I want it to still be exciting each time we start a new chapter.
Yeah, for it to be like an event when I think we've only got 1 or 2 chapters left in it, but yeah, I feel the same. Like we want it to be this big event for each one that we do. And that is it. That is 4 new expansions for 4 of our absolute favorite games. These are all top 20 games for us. And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Actually quite a bit. What order would you put these in?
Ooh, I think they are all really good. If I had to rank it, I would put Missing Expedition first because I really like the cooperative campaign. And for us, that has just worked so well. I would probably put Extra Salt second because we play Sea Salt and Paper so much. It lives in our backpack. So having those few extra cards and balancing it has really helped. Marine Worlds third. I think it's a great expansion and I really like the action cards and the marine animals. And I think if we have played it like 50 times, it might have been my favorite expansion. And then Cascadia Landmarks, I still think is a good expansion. It did take us a few games to warm up to it, but I think the little extra complexity is something that means we'll only play it like 50% of the time.
Yeah, and I basically agree with that. These top 3 are almost tied for me. Like they're almost exactly equal. I think I almost want to say Sea Salt and Paper number 1, but then also Ark Nova. Like I love the tokens. I love the new cards. It has felt so much fun going through the cards faster, even though there's more cards. All 3 of those absolutely fantastic. And then Cascadia, it's really like what sort of player are you, right? Like if you're someone who likes Cascadia but just wishes there was a bit more oomph to it, you're gonna love this. This is like exactly that. We don't always want that, so yeah, I agree. The only reason that I put this just a smidge below these other 3 is that it's probably not an every time expansion. It's like a 50% of the time expansion. But I'm glad that we've got the option.
And thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments if you've played any of these expansions or what some of your favorite expansions that came out this year were. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.